plan was to reread the Da Vinci Code and then to read The Secrets of the Code, which I've had for years but just never got to reading. That in turn led to a massive stumble down a rabbit hole. The Da Vinci Code was a good read, and I enjoyed it as much the second time as I did the first a number of years ago. The Secrets of the Code went through a number of different things and led to a whole variety of other research. After I read the Da Vinci Code, I did up a mind web of all the different subjects and spin-off areas to look at, discovering that this particular cube of books all related back to the Da Vinci Code. When I first read the Da Vinci Code a number of years ago, I then followed up by reading The Holy Blood and the Holy Grail. I've recently finished reading A Brief History of King Arthur and the Lost Kingdoms, a book that I had read before. The Hiram Key is on my to reread list. It's a book that I'd also read a number of years ago. The God Code by Greg Braden is also a book that I'll be reading again as it connects in with the Da Vinci Code and all the other subjects that spin off from it. I just finished The Essence of Gnostics. Then we have Grail, which I still need to read. Bloodline of the Holy Grail, which I also need to read. I finished Realm of the Ring Lords and Genesis of the Grail Kings, and I've read the works by Gardner a number of years ago, and until I just finished rereading these two, I had forgotten that he actually talks about the Anunnaki, so that now means going to read the works on Zecharia Sitchin, the Earth Chronicles, as well as revisiting Gods of the New Millennium by Alan Alford, and that relates back to Sitchin's work. It also means reading the two books that I have by Michael Tellinger, Slave Species of the Gods and African Temples of the Anunnaki. Books that I've both read before but need to revisit. Of course, it also means now going to read The Sign and the Seal by Graham Hancock, which I've had for a number of years, but haven't read before. Haven't read Ascension Masters by David Wilcox yet, although I have read his Synchronicity Key, and I think this is all going to connect in. I need to revisit Fingerprints of the Gods by Graham Hancock, again because there's different connections. Two other books that I've yet to read by Zecharia Sitchin, The End of Days and There Were Giants Upon the Earth. UFOs, oddly enough, may also connect into this whole spiraling out. And then those come back to Finding Merlin, which was an enjoyable read as well and ties in with all of this. As I was reading The Secrets of the Code, I realized I have the Templar Revelation. I just haven't read it before. So that's on my upcoming to read list, as well as turning the Templar Key, which is a follow-up book to the Hiram Key, The Esoteric Secrets of Surrealism, which will also tie back, Hidden Stonehenge, which I haven't read yet, and that may even end up tying back in with all of this as we're dealing with history in Britain as well as the history of the church. That leads up to what I'm currently reading, which is A Brief History of the Knights Templar, revisiting the rise and fall of the Nephilim. I've read that a number of years ago, and I, at that time, didn't find it one of my favorite reads, so I'm curious to see how I find the information this time. Also reading A Brief History about Stonehenge. Other books that will end up tying in with this new search is, of course, is, of course, Everyday Life in Bible Times, a gift from one of my former students. Warrior Women, as I've come across Bodacia in some of this reading. Lords of the Battle, revisiting the Caves of the Sun, as mythology ties in with all of this. The Shining Ones, which talks about an ancient priesthood and the information that comes forward that connects back to Hancock. Two other books that tie in with this. I've read The Perfect Heresy before. This is about the Cathars, so I need to revisit that. The Dead Sea Scrolls I've had for a while, but I haven't read it yet. The interesting thing is I have the books here, the whole shelf down below. Yes, I need to do some dusting. The other section of books that will tie in are about ancient Egypt, as this, of course, all has connections to Bible times, different things that happened. And then down below that, all my books on the Anunnaki, other ancient civilizations, and different ideas about humanity. So it's interesting how, up until I read the Da Vinci Code again, I hadn't actually realized how many of these books were going to all interconnect. Other books that I need to revisit, and I've read both of these before, are Return of the Rebel Angels and Wisdom of the Watchers by Timothy Wiley. I read those books a number of years ago, and it's interesting how, although these books didn't speak to me at the time I read them, there were some interesting thoughts presented. I'm glad that I hung on to them now because I can revisit them and see how they connect back into all the other information. Other books that I'll end up revisiting is In Search of Dracula, which is the fiction novel by Bram Stoker, and Vampires. And how does all this connect back to the Da Vinci Code and that whole rabbit hole? Is while I was reading the books by Lawrence Gardner, he talks about Vlad Tepes, as well as the Order of the Dragon, connecting back, because we're talking about historical events, different connections. The Knights Templar were similar to the Order of the Dragon, if I'm remembering that correctly, about protecting Christianity. And from Vampires, we travel to archetypes, as throughout these works, Carl Jung has been mentioned a number of times. So these are two other books that I'll be revisiting. So it's interesting how two books have now led to over 20 plus, and the list is growing to try and make all the connections and figure things out. And the one thing I'm certainly grateful for is all of these books are in my personal collection. So I have more than enough reading to do, but it has definitely changed the reading plan that I had. My original reading plan was to go back and revisit my different energy work books, as well as read about Qigong, which I just recently purchased. I had also planned to read Sacred Healing, reread Lightworker, as well as The Power of Now, and revisit Creon, which I had read before. I decided to read the Da Vinci Code a month and a bit ago. The plan was, of course, to read Secrets of the Code, which had been waiting, and then suddenly everything led to other books and other discoveries, so it may be a little bit before I get back to some of my other reading plans. Other books that I'm planning to get to, because some of the readings getting to be a little bit heavy, and a few weeks ago my husband ended up suddenly having surgery that we weren't expecting, and the whole world went upside down and topsy-turvy. So thankfully now he's back on the mend and back to work, which means I also need to get myself back on track. So what I'm planning to start reading and working through is getting myself into a positive space, getting my own health back on track, and I'm hoping that these books can help me with getting that positive frame of mind. So I have tarot for self-discovery, rituals for self-care, 3-minute positivity, 369 laws of attraction, 21 rituals to change your life. So my book plate is a bit full, as is my everyday world right now, and I'm hoping to get back on track with getting some of my other videos together and uploads. Let me know in the comments down below, have you read the Da Vinci Code and what were your thoughts about it? Did you end up spinning off into a huge rabbit hole as I have and following up on different subjects? Let me know if you've read any of the books that I've mentioned today, whether it was about the Da Vinci Code, or do you have books about getting yourself into a positive place and a positive frame of mind? Until next time, have a great one.